Hi, so I'm here to talk about POWs in Imperial Russia during the First World War. So the reason why I got into the topic is because you don't really hear this discussion that much on YouTube, because mostly when you look about the topic or about POWs in Russia, it shows you the Second World War. And I have a friend whose grandfather was a POW in Imperial Russia during World War One, and that was really kind of interesting, and that's the reason why I got interested in the topic and started to learn about it. Because what was it like to be a POW during the Russian Civil War and before that political turmoil? And then also, I do have a speech impairment, so I might be a little bit funky on some words, but let's get into it. The story of prisoners of war in Russia during the First World War is complex. It spans close to 8 years from mid-1914 until 1922, when the last POWs were repatriated. The large time frame concluded with major political changes in Russia, exposing POWs to three consecutive governments with distinct POW policies. Russia captured an estimated 2.4 million over the 5 million soldiers that fell into enemy hands along the Eastern Front, and at least 8 million in total in all other theaters of the war. Over 2 million POWs in Russia, 90% of those captured from Austro-Hungary. Among these included Slavs, Poles, Ruthenians, Czech, Slovak, Serbs, Croatian, and Serbians, made up half of the POWs. A quarter was ethnic Germans and Hungarians, and the rest were Italians and Ruthenians. I can't say Ruthenians, sorry about that. The second largest group was the German army, that was about 168,000 soldiers that were captured, and the last largest group was Ottoman and Bulgarian POWs that estimated about 50,000 soldiers that were captured. The reason why so many soldiers from the Austro-Hungarian army surrendered, because so many of them were from Slavic origin, Poles, Czechs, Slovaks, Croatians, and Serbs, and had very little loyalty to the Austro-Hungarian Empire and its rulers. They viewed the war between Russia and the Central Powers in ethnic terms as a competition between the Slavic and German warlords, and they were definitely on the side of the former. Slavic soldiers surrendered to the Russians en masse during the war. So Russian treatment of POWs in World War One was really good compared to a lot of other nations. And also the treatment of Czech soldiers were really advanced to a lot of the other countries during this time. But the Russian Revolution ended all of that. So your living conditions a lot of the time were based off with nationality. The Russian leadership looked really favorably on Slavic POWs, so they were mostly sent to the western part of the empire. They didn't have to work in Siberia, and they had a little bit better jobs because they didn't have to mine. But German, Austrian, and Hungarians were often sent to Siberia, and they would have to work in mines and construction programs in Siberia. Although Russia tried to distinguish ethnic Slavs from Germans and Austrians, there were never really any Slav-only camps or any German-only camps in Imperial Russia. There was a military hierarchy between POWs, so officers received better treatment. Their privileges reflected in the circumstances of the transportation, living conditions, and most crucially in the fact that they were exempt from forced labor while receiving a monthly salary. And confusion over determining rank equivalence between the Austrian and Russian armies caused a promotion of cadets and ensigns, ensuing in the inflated numbers of 54,000 officers among the Austro-Hungarian POWs. So your experience from getting captured to experiences being moved from camp were pretty much kind of based on how big of a group. If you were in a small group, you would treat it in like an orderly fashion, but if you were in a large group of hundreds and hundreds of POWs, your living condition would be worse, because Russia had a big problem with the organizational problems with large groups of soldiers during the First World War. It would take normally 3 months for the soldiers to reach the place of internment. They were interrogated and the wounded were singled out for treatment. Normally they would be taken to Kiev or Moscow, and they took them to main assembly areas. They were registered and their places of internment appointed according to their nationality. However, dividing ethnicities proved to be complex, while some Slavs refused to identify themselves as such. Others benefited from the Slavic-sounding names, thus many Slavs ended up in Siberia instead of remaining in Central Russia. So soldiers were powered into Tzimisky, or so-called warm wagons, which usually transported Russian soldiers. They were fitted with 2 to 3 rows of bunks, a stove, and a latrine bucket. Despite their nicknames, the cars were cold in the winter and unbearably hot during the summer. They tended to be loaded beyond capacity, carrying around 30 to 40 men, and riddled with vermin, giving rise to disease. The only provision regularly supplied was hot water available at train stations. The POWs were meant to receive a daily payment in order to procure their own food, but the money was rarely paid out. The men were sometimes forced to resort to begging, and during the transportation the men did not know the length of their journey or where they were going. So in 1914, when a wave of POWs were coming to Russia, a lot of them were sent to Siberia, which was very uncivilized at the time, and the number of POWs greatly outnumbered the population that was already there, so they suffered from housing and not being able to get enough food. So in Siberia they tried to find any bedding they could to work at a POW camp, and then they also make makeshift camps for POWs, which was not great. In the first year of the war, thousands of POWs died to disease. The Russian authorities failed to grasp the extent of the problem that epidemics continued to spread throughout 1916. Responding to the enormous death toll and growing international pressure, the Russian government eventually developed a camp system with significant and improved living conditions for POWs. By 1917, Russia had more than 400 internment facilities. The size of the POW camps were usually smaller than in European Russia, between 2,000 and 5,000 men, then in Siberia up to 35,000 men. The number of prisoners in camps often fluctuated, and the POWs tended to be moved repeatedly between camps. They consisted of log or brick barracks, and here's a Russian word that I cannot say for the life of me. That means huts digged into the ground, or other buildings such as stables and warehouses. Such a barracks varied greatly in size, holding between 500 and 1,000 men, notably fewer in the case of officers, according to Esa Brainstorm. And rooms were often overbooked by 50 or 100%. Furniture was scarcely provided beyond the bed bunks and stoves for heating. Everyday life for officers was greatly improved. Officers received a monthly salary from which they could procure their own food and other necessities, initially allowing them to get quite comfortable. And sorry, these are names I cannot pronounce, but he describes that the standard of living as considerably higher than those of their own homestead civilian population. Despite international regulation, the situation varied greatly between the camps, which were partly due to the complex political hierarchies. The Red Cross was a significant role in the treatment of POWs. Russia treated the German POWs quite deplorably overall, due to Russia greatly disagreed with how Germany would treat Russian prisoners of war in Germany. But overall, with 400,000 deceased, the death rate of POWs in Russia was among the highest of all countries. Political turmoil started in 1917 with the February Revolution of 1917, which had an immediate effect on the treatment of POWs, where Tsarist Russia had trouble coping with the organizational defects by indulging the ethnic segregation of POWs. The provisional government aimed intensifying POW discipline and using POW label more efficiently for the war effort. However, they largely failed due to the revolutionary mood and war weariness of the country. The February Revolution of 1917 loosened camp restrictions to some extent, The policies from the provisional government were said there, but with a lot of confusion over the policies. But some POWs were typically granted greater freedom of movement. Others suffered reprisals under Alexander Kaczynski as the consequence of the renowned offensive against the Central Powers through the use of POW labor was more relegated. The October Revolution altered the situation drastically. After the initial chaos, the Bolsheviks declared POWs free citizens, and the officers were theoretically declared the class enemies. But with freedom, that also meant the POWs also no longer received governmental support and were obligated to fend for themselves. A large number of POWs welcomed the Bolsheviks, often less for political reasons than from belonging peace and rapid repatriation, and only a minority of the POWs joined the Russian Communist Party or fought in international divisions of the Red Army during the Civil War. Initially, in the Russian Civil War, the Bolsheviks initially only established the power in Western Russia, while most of Siberia was shaken up in the Civil War until 1920, leaving POWs in Siberia under the control of the US and Japan. Thus ensured a period of constant changes and utter insecurity for the 430,000 POWs in Siberia who were caught between two fronts and opposing policies. The White forces, for their part, sent POWs back to prison camps and halted the repatriation process that was expected with the signing of the West-Levant Peace Treaty. Approximately, I fucked it up. So about 70,000 POWs joined the Czech region, which was a major political force against the Bolsheviks, and whose members were notorious for the brutality towards POWs. The seizure of the Trans-Siberia Railroad by the Czech region in May of 1919 blocked off Siberia from Europe and halted the official repatriation of POWs until 1920. So by the autumn of 1919, most of the POWs in European Russia had already left. Only a few left through official channels, but a lot of the West returned on their own, partly taking advantage of lax supervision during periods of political disarray between November of 1919 and the summer of 1920. By 1920, there were still 500,000 POWs staying in Russia, but by 1922, the POW process was over. There is an unknown amount of POWs that decided to stay in Russia. Apart from political reasons, many had families with Russian women and had jobs, while the future of their home countries were uncertain. Alright, so that's the end of the video. These are something I've been wanting to do for a long time, but I was just afraid that my speech was going to hold me down, so I just did it anyway. Hopefully it wasn't too bad. If there's anything that I should improve on, or I made like a big historical inaccuracy, please leave a comment down telling me about it. But yeah, if you like the video, you give it a thumbs up, and thank you for taking the time to watch it.